You speak for your communities representing an incredible richness of cultures, languages, and perspectives. For years, Queen Camilla stood by King Charles as a sign of resilience, or so the palace hoped the public would think. Camilla's climb up the firm ranks was nothing short of miraculous, having been carefully marketed from royal mistress to respectable queen. She faced the disdain of Diana's legacy, suffered public gossip, and was eventually crowned beside the man she had secretly loved. But behind the scenes, something worse was simmering, something that King Charles, in all his regal wisdom, could not have predicted. There had always been rumors, a weird reshuffle of staff. Senior courtiers went peacefully into retirement, unexplained choices at the royal foundation, but no one dared to connect the connections, let alone utter them loudly. Camilla had become untouchable, shielded by her new title, her proximity to the throne, and the appearance of unity. However, those closest to the crown, Kate Middleton, Princess Anne, and even William, felt a change in the mood. A subtle power was flowing through the palace, imprinted with Camilla's fingerprints. Insiders had seen that some traditions were being updated without input, and Charles appeared more isolated than ever, relying mainly on Camilla's tight group for advice. Her children and grandchildren, who had never held formal positions, suddenly gained access to secret royal occasions. It was all carefully hidden under the pretext of modernity. But under the surface, Camilla was building the groundwork for something far more than a ceremonial function. She was reshaping the monarchy in her own image. Then it happened. Charles came on to something he was never supposed to see, a private dossier perhaps, a letter not intended for royal eyes, or a staff member who simply couldn't keep quiet. Whatever it was, it broke the illusion in 1 second. The guy who had supported Camilla for decades, risking his public image and straining his relationships for her, now saw her in a disturbing new light. The betrayal was not romantic, rather it was calculated. And for Charles, that stung far deeper. Everything inside the palace changed after that. Meetings were canceled. Appearances got chilly. The press started speculating, although they didn't know half of it. Behind closed doors, a storm was brewing, and at its core was a king betrayed by the one lady he believed he could trust. Camilla was expelled from the palace once the truth was revealed. It started with a folder placed carelessly on a desk at Clarence's house. At first sight, it appeared to be nothing more than regular letters, private secretaries' reports, and briefing notes for the king to study. However, one page, partially buried between two unrelated files, stuck out. It was not labeled, it was not signed, and it wasn't supposed to be there. However, the contents of that one page would shock the monarchy to its foundation. King Charles read the first few paragraphs with the nonchalant disinterest of someone used to routine paperwork. But within seconds, the tone of the writing piqued his interest. Too personal, too deliberate, and much too familiar. A top assistant close to Camilla authored the memo, which detailed a strategy for solidifying long-term influence over royal engagements, charitable donations, and even public opinion. But the most startling aspect was not the substance, it was the language, the references, the coded names. They mirrored the intimate chats Charles had with Camilla alone. His hands froze, his stomach sank. He read it again and again. Every time a new wave of astonishment washed over him. The letter discussed maintaining her family's legacy within the institution, promoting non-bloodline members to major cultural patronages, and quietly undermining legacy figures, language that thinly disguised a stealthy campaign against Kate, William, and even Princess Anne. It wasn't only about power. The goal was to shape the future monarchy based on her bloodline, rather than his. But it did not end there. The folder had more. Transcripts of private discussions were tucked away in the back. Notes that could only have come from someone who knew Camilla's most sensitive interactions. Some were emails, others looked to be recaps of phone calls, And one file? A direct communication from a high-ranking aristocrat praising Camilla for her support and delaying the Princess of Wales' new education initiative. That effort had been Kate's passion project for over a year, but had been repeatedly stopped for budgetary reasons. Charles was not an idiot. He had formerly ignored palace gossip, dismissing it as an unavoidable part of royal life. But this was deliberate. This was personal. The lady beside him had subtly corroded the fundamental cornerstone of his reign: unity, healing, and continuity. He said nothing at first. Not to aides, not to Camilla. He simply became silent. Camilla noticed. She inquired whether he was ill. He murmured excuses and retreated to his study more than usual. But within, his mind was racing. He started cross-referencing engagements, comparing who had been invited and who had been omitted. He summoned ancient records which she imagined had been forgotten. Then he did something no one expected. He discreetly faced the employees who had been relocated, reassigned, or retired without explanation. One by one, they reinforced his suspicions. A former press advisor stated, "Your Majesty, we were told not to cross her. Some of us left because we couldn't handle her influence anymore." The dam broke. Charles eventually addressed Camilla, but not with a shout. It was with the controlled rage of a man whose patience had failed. They were alone in the royal chambers. There are no aides. There are no courtiers. Only husband and wife, king and queen. "You were playing me all along," he explained, holding the paperwork in his fingers. Camilla's face became pale. For a minute, she didn't say anything, just gazed, as if wondering which aspect of the plot he had discovered. But the quiet was all the assurance he needed. "What else is there, Camilla?" he asked. "What else did you do behind my back?" She attempted to deflect by blaming overzealous personnel, denying the phrase, and even questioning the validity of the notes. But Charles had seen enough. Her falsehoods were clunky now. The enchantment was broken. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse her of treason or toss her out that same night. Instead, he gave a single directive before leaving the room. "From this moment on, you do nothing without my approval." The queen, who had formerly had great influence over the throne, had just lost it, and the hush that followed would only grow as the palace prepared for a reckoning no one expected, except, perhaps, those who had warned him all along. Camilla's carefully constructed image as the faithful queen consort was based on a long-planned strategy. Her agenda was neither outspoken or arrogant. It was quiet, gradual, and carefully concealed under the pretext of modernity. But now that Charles can see everything in retrospect, the strands of her scheme form a horrifying picture. Camilla was more than just interested in support. She sought authority, permanent power. The major theme was legacy, not the crown's heritage, but her own bloodline's position in royal history. Insiders spotted Camilla gradually diverting the monarchy's attention when her title was confirmed. It began with requests. Her children and grandchildren, as well as commoners without royal rank, were invited to private family festivities often reserved for individuals in the line of succession. She campaigned for appearances with Charles, not merely as a companion, but also as a decision-maker. And behind closed doors, she pushed for their recognition. Titles, patronages, trust posts, and even future financial arrangements. Most impressively, she concentrated her influence on one critical issue: succession control. Whispers throughout the palace said Camilla attempted to undercut William's rising prominence. Proposals supported by the Prince of Wales were delayed for strategic reasons. Key projects, such as Kate's mental health and early child care programs, were unexpectedly stymied by red tape. Trusted aides who had previously worked for Diana but now serve William and Kate were relocated without explanation. At least one major press leak involving tensions between Kate and Camilla was traced back to a journalist with long-standing ties to Camilla's former public relations team. It wasn't just about improving her image, it was also about weakening theirs. Perhaps the most brazen aspect of Camilla's hidden agenda was her rumored plan to place her grandson, Freddie Parker Bowles, in future ceremonial positions. While Freddie lacked a royal title and a place in the line of succession, Camilla reportedly pushed for him to serve as a royal page at important state events, and even suggested granting him honorary status through obscure royal precedent. The goal, according to one disillusioned aide, was simple. She wanted her blood to be visible, even if it meant rewriting royal conventions. Charles had previously ignored these signs. He dismissed them as the natural blending of two families, an attempt at reconciliation after decades of scandal. But, in reality, Camilla was reshaping the royal orbit to center on herself, and those who shared her surname. The contrast could not have been sharper. Camilla built a shadow empire while Kate and William worked within the traditional structures of duty, public service, and institutional deference, one based on influence and maneuvering rather than merit or birthright. Her understanding of Charles made the situation even more dangerous. She understood how to present her moves as solutions to his concerns. She presented interference as support and manipulation as loyalty. For years, she had donned the mask of the peacemaker. In truth, she had been establishing a silent monarchy within the monarchy, one she wanted to leave behind long after Charles was gone. But now, the illusion has crumbled. Charles now understood. The lady he had loved, protected, and put alongside him on the throne had never ceased campaigning. And the price of that desire will soon come due. Long before King Charles opened his eyes to Camilla's cunning tactics, there was one person who had silently witnessed it all. Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Reserved by nature and educated in the art of royal subtlety, Kate had never publicly confronted Camilla. But her quiet was not acquiescence. Behind her controlled demeanor were carefully calculated cautions, tiny hints that something wasn't right. To the public, Kate performed the part expected of her, supportive, gracious, never ruffled. But behind palace walls, she began sensing a difference almost immediately after Camilla's crowning. Invitations to family functions came late, or not at all. Camilla's circle began controlling committee decisions, and recommendations from Kate's office were held up by logistical concerns. It was never blatant, never confrontational, but it was purposeful. Kate's early childhood project, one of the most personal topics she had ever advocated for, became the first victim. Though it had received global acclaim and support from educators, Camilla's staff began promoting other goals that were neatly linked to her own organizations and patronages. It wasn't long before funding allocations moved unexpectedly, and Camilla's supportive advisors inserted themselves into meetings they had no prior knowledge of. Nonetheless, Kate did not say anything. She was aware of the hazards. The Princess of Wales has spent years studying the secret rules of survival inside the firm. Above all, she knew that the monarchy was larger than any personal conflict. Instead of escalating the situation, she delivered her warnings the only way she could, by action. When Camilla offered a combined public appearance to show unity, Kate politely declined. When invited to assist Camilla's mental health effort, she shifted her emphasis to her own long-standing causes. Aides would occasionally overhear her say, "Let the Queen Consort shine." She appears to be determined. It was dry, deliberate, and tinged with silent anxiety. Kate's suspicions were completely justified, however, when a leaked discussion between Camilla's aide and a tabloid journalist reached William's media team. The exchange hinted at an attempt to draw public comparisons between Kate and Camilla, presenting the former as inexperienced and chilly. Though no names were stated directly, the context was quite evident. For the first time, Even senior palace officials acknowledged what Kate had been too composed to say. She never had the crown's best interests, Kate told William privately, according to one insider. She had her own. Kate did not gloat when Charles learned Camilla's deception. There was no gratification in being proven correct, only pain. It was unfortunate that the monarchy had once again broken from within. She recognized the weight that suddenly fell on Charles' shoulders. The treachery was more than simply institutional. It was emotional, and the route ahead would include considerably more than punishment. It would require rebuilding. As the palace discreetly began to dismantle Camilla's influence, Kate took on a position that was entirely hers, calm, stabilizing, and forward-looking. No declarations. There are no conflicts. It's just presence. She intensified her public duties, spoke with personnel to reassure them, and continued to advocate for issues that had previously been under threat. And, as always, she conducted herself with Diana's signature calm grace. What's the difference? This time, her voice, whether silent or not, was finally heard. Prince William had learned at a young age how to conceal emotion via etiquette. But when he finally learned the entire extent of Camilla's machinations, he couldn't contain his rage. His serene exterior crumbled within palace walls, and for the first time in years, King Charles saw his son as a man reluctant to remain silent rather than the successor. William had never quite embraced Camilla. He tolerated her presence out of respect for his father and for the monarchy. However, the wounds left by his mother's suffering were never far below the surface. For years, he had seen Camilla gradually integrate herself into the institution, becoming more confident with each step. Nonetheless, he kept his tongue, for the crown, for stability, and for the heritage his mother died fighting to preserve. But when Charles handed him the documents, emails, reports, and taped conversations, exposing Camilla in a premeditated attempt to sideline both him and Kate, William raged. "She nearly dismantled everything," he remarked with clenched teeth. "Everything we labored for, everything Mum believed in." Charles was surprised by how much the remark stung. Because he knew William was not incorrect, the monarchy, which was already vulnerable in a contemporary environment, had been struggling to maintain popular faith. William and Kate have re-energized the institution by emphasizing responsibility, sincerity, and service. Camilla had spent years subtly undermining them, presenting it as modernity while solidifying her own control. William's outrage was not simply personal, it was existential. He sought accountability, not simply symbolic gestures or secret reassignments of personnel. He sought complete openness within the palace. He wanted Camilla removed from all internal decision-making positions. Most importantly, he sought assurance that this would never happen again. "She's not a part of the future," he informed his father. "And if you can't see that, then maybe you're not either." According to one assistant, Charles was completely taken aback by the line. William wasn't lying. The emotional toll of seeing his mother marginalized, followed by witnessing his wife suffer subtle slights and planned exclusion, had finally penetrated the wall of royal diplomacy. And now that William had proof that Camilla had acted in bad faith, he was done with politics. What bothered him the most was not only what Camilla had done, but how long she had gotten away with it. The use of royal power, the gradual elimination of loyal advisors, and the desire to promote her own family. None of it happened quickly, and Charles, blinded by love, loyalty, or shame, had permitted it. William couldn't help but feel deceived by both Camilla and his father's silence. Why hadn't he noticed it? Why didn't he protect them? Despite his rage, William maintained his composure. He understood what was at risk. The public could not know the entire truth. The crown required unity on the surface, even if war lines had been created behind it. So William did what he was supposed to do. He kept his rage hidden behind closed doors, while emphasizing that things would never be the same again. He enhanced his own profile, strengthened his squad, and moved to protect Kate from further meddling. Camilla, who had been deprived of operational control, was outwardly present, but secretly helpless. And William, he was no longer the patient heir waiting in the wings. He was now the protector of the future. And this time, he would not let history repeat itself. Princess Anne had long been the monarchy's silent enforcer, stoic, efficient, and fervently devoted to the crown. Not persons or emotions, but the institution itself. She was not persuaded by popularity contests or palace politics. Anne prioritized duty above personal sentiments. Even she couldn't deny the rot that had infiltrated the firm's heart, rot that now bore Camilla's name on it. When Charles initially told Anne about what he'd uncovered, he expected criticism, or worse, silence. The two had previously battled, particularly over Camilla's burgeoning dominance. Anne has long had reservations about her sister-in-law's position in the royal limelight. She considered it as a perversion of tradition and an unnecessary complexity for the monarchy. But out of respect for Charles and to keep up appearances, she bit her tongue. Until now, Charles had scarcely begun telling what he had discovered when Anne interrupted, "You let her go too far." And now the entire home is disintegrating. Her tone was chilly. Final, it was not simply dissatisfaction. It was a verdict. Anne was never emotional, yet her words penetrated deeper than any explosion. She saw Camilla's behavior as a betrayal, not just of Charles, but of the monarchy itself. Inserting her family where they had no proper place, undermining William and Kate, and silencing trustworthy servants was much more than just treachery. It posed a danger to the crown's continuation. Anne has witnessed this type of covert coup before. Courtyards exploiting weak kings, outsiders working their way into power. But this was different. This was done internally. Camilla wasn't simply overstepping. She was establishing an empire within the monarchy, and no one had stopped her until now. "There's no way back from this," Anne stated firmly. "Not for her, and frankly, not for you, unless you act." For Charles, that was the last push. If even Anne, his most steadfast, conscientious sibling, had reached this decision, the situation was irreversible. He had attempted to explain Camilla's actions as misunderstood loyalty or misplaced ambition. But Anne took those justifications away. Camilla's actions were deliberate, premeditated, and irrevocable. Anne provided little emotional consolation, no sympathy. She did provide a solution. Camilla would retain the title of Queen Consort, but lose all internal influence. She would no longer be able to advise on staffing, attend foundation meetings, or participate in future transition plans for the monarchy. Her public appearances would be limited, regulated, and symbolic. Behind the palace's gates, she would be what Anne described as a contained presence. What if Camilla refused? Anne made it plain that she would personally go to the Privy Council and request that the Queen Consort title be formally abolished by royal decree, the nuclear option. Charles nodded quietly, and in that instant he realized the cost of inactivity. Princess Anne did not need to shout. She didn't have to plot. Her strength was in her will. She'd seen monarchs come and go, scandals bloom and fall. But this time, she wasn't going to let it slip. Camilla had made a move. The crown was now making their own, and Anne would be the one to make sure it stayed. There was no major announcement, no dramatic exit. There was no broadcast remark that acknowledged the reality. The palace never needed to say anything. The stillness said volumes. Camilla's presence gradually faded. She was still formally Queen Consort, but her name had vanished from royal itineraries. Her patronages had been transferred for logistical reasons, and the happy images that palace PR workers had previously promoted were no longer in circulation. Insiders knew Camilla had been exiled, not by distance, but by significance. She remained within the royal walls, but she no longer conducted court. Her office was stripped of essential employees. Her advisors have been removed. Her power on Charles was removed with surgical precision. Behind the gates, she transformed into a ghost, dressed in pearls, haunting the halls she once governed with whispered directions and vigilant eyes. Charles, sad but determined, continued on with a colder sense of duty. The guy who had previously fought the world to justify her presence next to him now compelled her to recede. Not out of vengeance, but out of survival. The monarchy had been injured from inside, and healing could not begin until the infection was eliminated. Kate and William resumed their positions with newfound power. Their mission for service, humility, and continuity took center stage. Public trust was restored, not because of official words, but because of who the public saw leading the way. Behind them, quiet but strong, stood Princess Anne, the crowned steel spine. Camilla's peaceful exile was not a fall from favor in the public view, but rather a retreat into irrelevance behind the most important walls. Her kingdom, meticulously constructed over years of manipulation, had collapsed in weeks, and with it, any possibility of remaking the monarchy in her own image. She previously aspired to be queen in more ways than one. However, she ultimately departed as something considerably less, not disgraced, not dethroned, just erased.